Let's make sure we're on. Okay, we're live. All right, let's see if there's anybody in the chat first of all. What's happening, chat?
Yeah, it's a bit of a late one today.
Yeah. Very late, but there should still be some people about. Only 3 viewers so far. Come on, people. We're not going to start talking until we got some people in the chat to talk to.
Yeah, that's less than what my streams get, 3 viewers.
All right, we got some people now. Who's here? Team Batman, yes. CJ, okay. Sean Baker. Sean Baker somehow got into the chat before the stream even went live.
Oh, that's dedication.
That's dedication, bro. Don't know how he managed that, but before the stream even went live, he was in the chat. So I don't know if he's MI5 or what, but crazy. Afro Soul, yes. Jake Moon, Level Up Boxing, Sticky One Still. Anthony Lins. All right. Wait till we get to 100, then we'll go. We're at 59 in the chat so far.
I'm not used to numbers like these.
Shout out to Belt Loops Matter for the super chat. He says, did you see Benavidez destroy Lemieux? I think he's too strong and big for Canelo. Yes, I did see it, and we will get onto that. Faith Beamer, shout out to you from you're all the way there in Ghana. Okay, international. Aaron says, how many are you still going to do more career reviews? Depends if people watch them, because the last 2 career reviews I did of Amir Khan and Kell Brook, they got terrible numbers. Terrible. Like, why am I spending hours upon hours doing these career reviews and it's got like 2,000-3,000 views?
Sean Baker shouting out to Akala. He's trying to stir it up again. Trying to stir it.
You better explain to me why you're shouting out Akala. How can you defend the guy? And in fact, before we talk about boxing, let me just set a few things straight about what I said regarding Kano and Getz. Yeah. Now, Getz is one of the best to ever do it, bar for bar. Lyrically, sick, flow, sick, all that stuff. Yeah. But I'm talking about his relevance today. Getz is not relevant today. And furthermore, I was thinking to myself, all these people defending Getz saying he's not washed and rare. I'm thinking, okay, let me give these people the benefit of the doubt. Let me actually go to Getz's YouTube channel, yeah, and see the kind of music he's been producing lately and over the past couple of years. So I go to Getz's official YouTube channel. He don't even have 100,000 subscribers. His channel is no bigger than my channel. And you're trying to tell me that this guy's not washed? Why is Getz, right? All the Getz fans out there, all the dedicated Getz fans, why is his channel no bigger than mine? This is a guy that's toured everywhere, that's done all this music, that's a legend in the game. His channel's no bigger than my channel. Some guy that makes videos about boxing on YouTube. What's that all about? And then I looked at all the tracks that he's made lately, and I'm telling you, trash. It's trash. Yeah. Again, Getz is a sprayers. He's one of the best to ever bless the mic in terms of bar for bar and flow for flow. But he's not a guy that makes songs that people care about, especially not now. He never really was back in the days. But now even less so. So come on. Getz is washed. Kano's washed. Yeah. It's a new day and time. The youngsters are having their day in the sun at this point. And all the olders, I mean, I'm sure they still have their little niche fans or whatever, but come on. All right, yeah. Anyway, off all the music talk, the Getz slander, subjective. Man says subjective. Well, yeah, music is subjective, but you can't say that, there's loads of people that love Getz now to the point where he's a mainstream. When I say mainstream, I'm talking about, I don't mean like commercial. I mean, the youths on the street are not talking about Getz's latest track. You understand what I'm saying? The majority of the fans who are tuning in to watch people's videos and listening on the radio or whatever they do, all the streaming services, they're not tuning in to listen to Gets or Kano. That's facts. Yeah. So as sick as Gets is and always was as a sprayers, somebody bar for bar that's sick, bro, he's not that guy anymore in terms of like popularity. So anyway, let's not get bogged down with that. Let's move on to boxing. Let's talk about, first of all, the Matchroom show headlined by Joshua Buatsi versus Craig Spider Richards. And today, of course, I have the illustrious Outmatch Boxing joining me from the Boxing Brotherhood. So let me park myself aside and you tell me what you thought about, first of all, what fights exactly did you see on the card? Did you see that cruiserweight? He's a Jamaican-born cruiserweight that Eddie Hearn signed. Did you see that fight?
Oh, is his surname Clark? C4?
Yeah. Is it Clark?
I think so.
I forget man's name, but did you see he fought some? I think that was his debut. He fought some guy, and he got hurt in the first round. Did you see it?
No, I didn't see it. I think it was his second fight. I think he had his.
Was it his second fight?
I didn't see it. I have to check it out. But I saw a couple of his amateur fights. This was a couple of years ago. He used to come through on my Instagram feed. I was never too impressed. And I didn't realize how old he was as well. He's in his early 30s.
Yeah, he is.
Which isn't a good look,
Yeah.
But
I watched that fight.
I can't comment on his fight last night.
Yeah, I watched that fight, and it was on the YouTube actually. The free, like before the belt, before the main thingy broadcast thing, and he fought some journeyman, and it was the first round, and he got hurt. His legs were all over the place. I was like, oh my gosh,
oh boy,
this guy in his 30s, is he really going anywhere? I mean, I don't want to write him off because boxing is full of underdog stories, unlikely successes. You look at somebody like, for example, Glencoff Johnson. He wasn't supposed to make it. He was supposed to be a journeyman, but somehow he had a pretty decent career, knocked out Roy Jones Jr. and fought a bunch of people, had a nice little run. So I don't want to write him off, but not looking promising. So what was the first fight on the card that you saw?
So I saw most of the Babic fight. I did see a little bit of one of the preliminaries, which was Shiloh de Freitas.
Okay.
I think this was his second fight. I think he last fought on the Ryder Jacobs undercard. And yeah, he looks good. He's like my age. He's a bit younger, but look quite one-paced. Like especially with young guys, you want to see them go through the gears a bit more because he was piecing the guy up, and I think he knocked his teeth out as well. So guys, his shorts were covered in blood, and it was good. Very accurate, good, consistent power, but a little bit methodical. But it looks like he's got some wrinkles to his game for someone who's in the early stages of their career. And I swear I heard his name on the amateur circuit, but I can't remember which club he went to. I think he might be from Repton. People in London now know about Repton, but definitely someone I'm going to watch going forward. I think he's got a decent amount of potential.
Yeah. Big up G-Man in the chat. Thanks for the super chat, bro. Big up G-Man every time. G-Man's definitely got the bag. What else was there? Yeah, the Babic fight. Okay, so I saw the Babic fight from the beginning. He got dropped in the first round quite early. And, what I've been wondering about Alan Babic for a while now is how much punishment he's been taking in that Dylan White training camp, Dylan White training camps, because they spar hard in there. Yeah. And I saw one clip on YouTube somewhere of White and Babic sparring, and it was an all-out war. It was like all out, both guys loading up and trying to knock each other's heads off. And at the end of the spar, Dylan was like, Babic and Dylan were like staring at each other. And in the end, Dylan like shoved Babic around the back of the head. It's like proper rough in there.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, Babic, a little, 14 and a half stone guy, taking all these big shots from Dylan White and all these other heavyweights that he's in there sparring with? What kind of damage is that doing to him? You know, is that affecting his punch resistance already? I suspect it is.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. You know, you only have so long in terms of shelf life, and he's not going to do himself any favors having not only the hard spars but the hard fights as well. Because I think it's fair to say he has very little regard for defense. You know, and even when he's in against the likes of Eric Molina, Eric Molina clocked him big, and
Yep.
obviously that's at heavyweight, so he could be fighting guys as big as Molina. I think going to bridgerweight is potentially the smart thing to do from a longevity point of view, but I think it comes with its own challenges because the guy who was in with yesterday, Bulski, I saw a little bit of him in the lead up to this fight, but there's virtually no footage of him on YouTube. I saw like one round, but I saw he went to points against Masternak.
Yeah, I
And
heard that.
he's pretty tricky, you know. I'm sure you saw, like, he's a decent technician, moves well, doesn't necessarily have the power. I think even his record didn't suggest that he was much of a puncher. But as you say, like, Babic's punch resistance, I don't think we really knew how good it was to begin with, and it could be deteriorating already because of the hard training and whatnot.
Yeah.
And you know, got put down in the first round, of course.
Yeah. To me, like when I go back and look at the Babic fights, so like when he fought Shondell Winters and those guys, he looked fresher to me. Like there's a certain look that a fresh fighter has about them. The way they move, the look in their eyes, their body language. You can just tell when a fighter's fresh. When a fighter starts getting jaded and he's taking too much punishment, it dulls their flame. You can just, there's something not quite there. There's something missing. It's hard for me to really explain it or, you know, quantify it, but you just know it when you see it. I mean, there was a heavyweight back in the days, way back in the early 2000s, called Dominic Gwynn. And he was a very good amateur for the United States, had loads of amateur fights, I think like 300 amateur fights. And when he turned pro, he already looked jaded. Like, this was clearly a guy who'd been in those tough American pro gyms, even when he was an amateur, having wars, because he looked like a flipping pro veteran when he was just turning over. You know what I mean? I'm like, nah, this guy ain't going nowhere. He's taking too much punishment already. He doesn't have that youthful exuberance. He doesn't have that freshness that you need at the start of a pro career. And to me, Babic is already looking jaded. You know, the way because he said he was going to be fresher in this fight and he was going to be more like the old Babic. I didn't see that. I saw the same jaded looking Babic, and he forced his way through because that's the kind of fighter he is. He fights 100, and also the way he trains. When you train to throw nothing but 100% power in every punch, and you have a high work rate as well, that's going to take it out of you too. You can get adrenal burnout and stuff like that from just constantly putting 100% into every punch and throwing loads of punches. So yeah, the way he trains is also not conducive to having a long career. I mean, he's already had that shoulder injury that he had to have surgery on, and then all the headshots he's taken. But as far as the fight goes itself, he was dropped from a fairly innocuous looking shot. And in fact, before I go on, I just want to answer G-Man's question here. G-Man said, does Dylan White have an eye for talent, or does he put too much stock in heart? Example, Babic. That's a good question. I think that he definitely put stock in heart. I'm sure Dylan's one of them kind of guys where if you don't have any heart, he's less likely to sign you, you know, especially if you're a heavyweight, because most of the talent that he's got, heavyweight talent, are people that he brought in as sparring partners. So if they were no good, if they were, you know, soft touches, then they wouldn't have lasted long enough for him to actually want to sign them. So yeah, they have to run the gauntlet and pass that test. But Fabio Wardley is more of a boxer rather than a tough guy. So I don't know. I think that, and some of the other people he's had, didn't he have Chris Congo as well?
I think so. I know Chris Congo, he'd frequent Miguel's a bit, so I think that's probably I think that's probably the case.
Yeah, I think he was managing Chris Congo.
Yeah, he was on the
So,
undercard of the first Povetkin fight, so it makes sense.
mm. Yeah, Babic was dropped by a fairly innocuous looking shot early in the first round. I mean, that can happen. You can get caught cold, but
Yeah,
he
I think
wasn't getting dropped by them kind of shots a few fights ago. So,
I think with the, I mean, that's a good point. He wasn't, because this is the first time he's been down in his career, isn't it?
yeah,
Because if you watch the punch, what he does is he comes out of that engagement and then he just bounces straight back in and slips to the front foot. So he would really put himself in like pole position to be hit by that left hook.
mm,
And yeah, as you say, he might not be warmed up. I think the guy, Buatsi, was probably quicker than he expected as well. So
mm,
maybe he didn't have time to brace, kind of caught him on the temple. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not a good look, especially when I think Buatsi was actually he's a cruiserweight in reality. I know Bridgerweight's obviously what it is officially, but Buatsi's a cruiserweight, and you know, less power, more speed. Maybe that makes a difference. But
mm,
yeah, I understand what you mean about Babic looking jaded because there's like you can't put your finger on it, but there's like a dullness. You know, there's no
yeah,
the sharpness isn't there, and
yeah,
even I don't know if you pick up on this, but usually when a fighter is jaded, as you say, it's like their body starts to look different. They look
yeah,
like their muscles look stringier. They don't look full. They look weaker,
mm,
less reactive. Um, so yeah, it's definitely something to wonder, especially if Babic hopes to actually go anywhere. If he's content to just sell out arenas and make a payday, it's you can't really complain too much as long as people are turning up. But if he wants to take on the likes of Oscar Rivas, you know,
mm,
I certainly don't give him much of a chance against Rivas. A puncher's chance, maybe, but
mm,
Rivas is he was a legit heavyweight, wasn't he?
yeah, yeah. I didn't see Rivas's fight at Bridgerweight if he's had more than one. I think he's had one fight, isn't he, for the actual Bridgerweight title?
I haven't been keeping track too closely, but I believe it's just one.
Mm. Yeah, I haven't seen what it looks like a Bridgerweight, but the heavyweight Rivas, Babic ain't beating him.
Nah, nah.
Babic ain't beating him. The only thing I can say about Rivas is that his stamina ain't the best.
Yeah,
So could Babic down the stretch maybe put some pressure on? I just think Rivas is too strong, and Rivas is technically good.
yeah.
You
He's
don't
a
see
bit stiff,
Rivas,
but he's tidy. Yeah,
yeah, you don't see Rivas throwing the big wide shots that Babic throws. It's hard to punch in between. I mean, you can. Dylan White managed to catch him in between shots.
mm,
In the second round, I think it was where he hurt Rivas. But
yeah,
it's not the easiest thing to do. Rivas has got a very tight guard. He's got a very sharp, fast jab. And he's unusual for a short pressure fighter in that he normally throws straight punches. He likes a
mm,
straight, the jab, the straight right hand. Occasionally he'll throw uppercut or a shot around the guard, but he favors straight punches. And against a guy like Babic, oh my gosh. So
yeah.
yeah,
Babic is like the antithesis. He's all wide
yeah,
hooks. And to be
yeah,
fair, it's probably why he mashes up his shoulder because he puts so much into it. But his technique and his biomechanics are so flawed that it's like every time he lands, yeah, he might do you damage, but he's doing just as much damage to himself.
yeah, yeah, true. Shout out to Stephen O for the super chat. Thank you for the super chat. Says he enjoys these podcasts. Big up. G Man, yes. React Paul was also with Dylan White. He was also managed by Dylan White. He was indeed. I remember that. And he's since moved on to Boxer. So yeah, React Paul. He also says he signed Carthy as well, the Southpaw, but he looked awful so far. Yeah. What else we got here? Rivas is low volume though. Yeah, Rivas is kind of low volume as a fight goes. I think he's just more he has stamina issues because he throws a decent amount in the early rounds, but then he slows down like he did against Brant Jennings. But yeah, the Babic fight overall, he just imposed his strength on that guy, Buatsi, and that was really the story of the fight. I think because of the fact that Babic is, that's the one thing about sparring all those heavyweights that was beneficial for Babic in this fight is that he's used to being in there against 250, 260-pound men and pushing them back. So when he's in there against a little 200-pound guy, he's not going to be able to compete in terms of strength with Babic. So Babic's physical strength was really the thing. He was able to just walk forward, bully the guy, hit him everywhere he could hit him. And he managed to get the decision. But I don't know how far Babic can go. Maybe, like you say, he's possibly content being the new Chisora, because that's basically what you described as in, him just turning up to get paydays for the fact that he's entertaining rather than him fighting anybody particularly good. Although Chisora does fight good level opposition. But even when Chisora's fighting the likes of Spilka, the crowd turn up to watch him. So, Babic, we'll see. So what was the next fight on the card? I think there was a few female fights, which I skipped. And then was there anything else other than the main event?
I didn't catch any of it. I wasn't really interested, to be fair, in all honesty.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like a downer, but it was, I wasn't feeling this one.
Yeah, me neither. So give us your assessment. I know you just uploaded a video. I saw that in my feed. But give us your assessment of the main event.
So Buatsi versus Richards, I actually had Buatsi winning. Not by much. I had 2 rounds even. Then Buatsi 6 rounds, Richards 4 rounds. So realistically, I could understand a draw. I can understand Buatsi winning as I had it. I could also understand Richards winning. Even though I had Buatsi winning, for my money, Richards was more impressive. I feel like, he doesn't do anything amazing, nothing really highlight reel, but he does just enough, at long range. He has the jab, especially. He mixes it up. He throws in some screw shots and some long right hands. And I feel like his defense really impressed me. Against the ropes, he rolls with shots a lot. Isn't always in position to counter, but sometimes when he does so with like a good degree of slickness. So as I say, I think Richards was more impressive, but Buatsi, he just has that kind of determination, that iron will. He's got a lot of dog in him. And I think he showed that in this fight. And Richards just has a lack of urgency, because there were those times where Buatsi would unload the clip and he'd be tired and he'd just be a sitting duck. And Richards, that was his opportunity to get an edge, maybe do some damage, or rock Buatsi's head back with the jab like he'd been doing previously. But I think Richards, is, I think, like many people predicted, his relaxed nature, if you want to call it that, it just kind of let him down a bit once again.
Yeah. For one, I thought that the commentary was terrible. I thought that they were so pro Buatsi, was unbelievable. And Tony Bellew took it to a whole new level, giving Buatsi a clean sweep through the first 7 rounds. That was shocking.
Yeah, and that was outrageous.
And that does influence what people think they're watching, because I was looking in the live chat when I was doing the stream last night with Boxing on the Edge, and there were some people that had the fight like 9-3 to Buatsi. And I'm like, wow. So you got sucked in by what Tony Bellew was saying on his scorecard and what the commentators were saying. But because obviously me and Henry Boxing on the Edge were just talking amongst ourselves, we weren't really listening to the commentary. We were watching the fight at the same time. We're not getting sucked in by all that. And for me, it was a very close fight. I didn't score it round by round, but there was definitely rounds that Spider Richards won. I mean, there was a lot of close rounds, even in the first half of the fight. But to give them all to Buatsi shows bias, because there were certain rounds there you could have very easily given them to Spider. And I feel like Spider relaxed into the fight sooner than Buatsi did. Buatsi was upright and stiff, and that's a criticism that people have leveled at him for a long time. But as the fight progressed, I want to say it must have been 6th, 7th round when Buatsi finally started to move his head. I mean, 6-7 rounds before he starts to move his head. Should have been doing it from the beginning. But he eventually started to relax into the fight. He just seemed a lot more tense to me. Spider looked like a guy, and he is a guy that had more long fight experience. He's been 12 rounds and all that kind of stuff. He understood better how to pace himself. So I'm not sure if Buatsi was maybe a little anxious about that, by the fact he hadn't been a distance before, and he knew he was in there with a guy who's been 12 rounds against Bivol. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he was a bit concerned about that. But yeah, for me, Buatsi was a bit tense early on in the fight. And I don't know whether it was a strategic thing or whether he was just tired, but Buatsi's pressure wasn't consistent enough for me. People talk about Spider not taking advantage of Buatsi when he was inactive, but I also feel like Buatsi weren't taking advantage of Spider when he was inactive. He was allowing Spider to win some slow rounds just by, flicking some jabs on the outside and that kind of thing. And Buatsi really just throwing nothing back. So is that a strategic thing by Buatsi? Is he listening to what Virgil Hunter is telling him and he doesn't want to throw unless he's completely in range? Is he overthinking? Or is it a case of him not having any energy to attack in any more than just a few spurts per round? I'm not sure what it is. I think as the fight progressed, it was more of a case of the latter, of his stamina getting to him. But I don't know, like earlier on in Buatsi's career, I feel like his pressure was more consistent than what I saw in there against Spider. But again, it could be him just trying to pace himself over the 12 rounds. All I know is that won't be enough to beat Dimitri Bivol by a long shot, because Eddie Hearn's talking about putting him in there with Bivol next if the Canelo Bivol rematch don't happen next. And nah, man, Buatsi on that kind of form, no way. No way. He's not going to come close to beating Bivol like that. He's going to need to up his game several levels. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think in terms of what the reason is behind Buatsi and his, I guess you could say, lack of activity or lapse in activities, I think it's, he doesn't necessarily have the best stamina, but I think it's, I think he does overthink. I think he's trying to, what's the word? He's maybe trying to be too advanced, dare I say? Because when you're going through that learning curve in boxing, you want to try and display everything you've been learning in the gym, in sparring, even if it's not necessarily there. And with a coach like Virgil Hunter, who we all know is a very disciplined, kind of technique orientated coach, I think maybe there's a little bit of some teething problems potentially, but I think it's a combination of that. But also with Richards, he doesn't do much himself, but he's disciplined. He's consistent. Maybe lacks that those upper gears, but what he does do, you can't knock him. He does it fairly well. And I think he also showed a better chin than most people anticipated, but also his strength on the inside, because, from the first round when they're both fresh, he was able to lock up Buatsi with ease.
Yep.
And Buatsi's work, his punches themselves were tidier. The short range quality is with Buatsi. I don't think anyone would dispute that. But because, Buatsi's got the quality up close, but he's not necessarily exceedingly stronger. So it was more difficult for Buatsi compared to his other fights, where not only is he more sophisticated up close, but he is stronger, so he just bullies people.
Yeah, I was surprised and impressed by Spider's strength, as you say, on the inside. In the first couple rounds, he was actually walking Buatsi back to the ropes on several occasions. He appeared to be stronger up close. I was very surprised by that. And also, as you say, Spider's chin. I mean, he took some flush shots from Joshua Buatsi, and he never seemed that badly hurt to me. He was able to come back almost immediately when he was getting hit with those clean shots. So I was really impressed by Spider's chin. It's not the norm for a British or any like heavyweight of this kind of level to be able to take flush shots like that and seemingly show no effects. So yeah, he's got a real good chin, and that makes his passive nature in the ring all the more puzzling, because if he was a guy that was protecting a weak chin, you can understand why he's a bit tentative to engage. But whereby it's actually got a really good chin, it's like, okay, can we get some more activity out of you now? Like, you can take the shots. So I'm not sure what it is with Spider, but with that being said, I feel like he was more proactive in this fight than he has been in several of his previous fights that I've seen. I was actually quite impressed with Spider's just proactive approach here. Comparatively speaking, he wasn't maybe as proactive as some other fighters would have been, but compared to previous Spider performances, I thought he threw quite a lot of shots. In fact, I'd be very interested to see if there is punch stats like CompuBox for this fight to see who threw the most punches. I'd be surprised if it weren't Spider. I feel like Spider threw more shots. On the outside, he always had the jab pumping. He was throwing those right hands in there. And yeah, I thought Spider all the way through the fight was the more relaxed and comfortable to me. And
Yeah.
Buatsi seemed like the one who was strained all the time. He was on the brink of gassing out several times. He punched himself out several times. And I just think that's not going to be good enough at the elite level. You're going to need to be a guy who's more in control of your stamina than that. You can't just be throwing a combination and then it takes you the whole rest of the round to recover, because there are other guys in the division who won't let you off the hook when you do that. There are guys in the division who are going to punish you for that. So, yeah, all this talk about putting Buatsi in for a world title next, I'm not sure where Eddie Hearn's going with that. I think that Virgil Hunter's got the right idea. Buatsi needs at least one more for me. Another 12-rounder, maybe somebody that can take him the distance and sort that. I say stamina, but just pacing himself, learning how to negotiate the 12 rounds. So, yeah, I thought overall it could have gone either way, to be honest. I think a lot of people were influenced by the very biased commentating and Tony Bellew's scorecard. I think he was much closer than that. I don't have an issue with Buatsi getting the decision, but I can understand also why Spider feels a little hard done by, because you can see when the scorecards were being read out, the Spider genuinely thought he won the fight. This weren't a thing where he was, you know how some fighters are just like, oh yeah, I won the fight. Like my man who fought Conor Benn. Remember that guy who fought Conor Benn? What's his name now? Latino guy.
Granados. Adrian
Granados. I mean, come on, bro. I know that fighters are internal, or what's the word? What's the term I use? Insufferable optimists. Yeah, I know that. But Granados knew damn well that he didn't win that fight.
Yeah,
but he was acting like he was trolling. But come on, bro. He knew damn well he didn't win that fight. But after the fight, he's like, oh yeah, I thought I won. And come on, bro. Yeah, but that wasn't the case with Spider Richards. He genuinely thought he won that fight. And he was disappointed that he didn't get the decision. So, all right, before we go on, shout out to Pedram for the super chat. Oh, shout out to Chris Andre for the super chat. Great to have you with us, Chris. Chris says, miss you guys, need to find a way to fix this element issue. As for the fight, without getting into the technical stuff, the action was superb. Great ad for the UK light heavyweight division. Facts. Yeah. So maybe I'm being a bit, because I'm just thinking about assessing Joshua Buatsi and where he's at as a contender, a prospect, and so on. But just as a spectacle and as an advertisement for British boxing is exactly what you said, Chris. It was a fantastic fight, fantastic advert for British boxing. And there's something I said in a recent video. We do a lot of this in the UK, matching prospect. Well, even though Spider Richards, in this case, he has lost before a couple of times, so maybe it's not the best example. But in the UK, we do tend to match prospects against each other quite frequently. I don't see that happening that much in America. So I do think we have to give ourselves a bit of a pat on the back for doing that. Yeah. In America, they'll tend to just build them up separately and they won't fight each other until they're both multiple time world champions. Whereas in the UK, they often get matched early. So yeah, it was a great advert for British boxing. It was a very good fight, very entertaining. And I feel a little bad for Spider because he obviously wasn't the A side. He was never going to get the rub of the green. And I think the scorecard showed that. One of the scorecards for me was definitely way too wide. If you had it for Buatsi by a couple rounds, I can't complain. But when they're giving it to Buatsi by like 4 or 5 rounds, come on. That judge had no intention of allowing Spider to walk away with a victory when he's coming in with scorecards like that, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, overall good fight. But for me, Buatsi's got a lot to work on. What I did like for Buatsi was the inside work. Very Andre Ward-esque, as you would expect, being trained by Virgil Hunter, where he's got one arm free, or he's tying one arm of his opponent up, and he's working with the free arm, and he's moving around. Do you know what I mean? So I like that work. His jab was good when he used it. He didn't use it enough. As the fight progressed and he started moving his head a bit more, he was finding the jab to the body. He was going upstairs with it, and he knocked Spider's head back several times with a real solid jab. Needs to use it more. When you got a guy who's moving around like that, who's, kind of tricky on the outside, you got to stabilize him with a jab. Buatsi wasn't jabbing enough. So, but when he decided to use the jab, it was very good. Yeah. And the body shots up close.
I think, I agree. The frequency of the jab wasn't there, but also the variation too. I feel like, that's something you can kind of use to gauge potentially how experienced a fighter is. Do they just rely on a textbook jab because that's what coach says, or do they actually understand the application of the jab and, they can mix up a little bit and, jab from a low hand to high, or jab to the body, or mix it up. Just, that kind of experimentation that you see with more experienced fighters. I think Buatsi, when you consider, when you really think about it, this is what his third learning fight. I guess you could say Kalic, Bolotniks, and now Richards. So it's still early days, and any talk about world level, against Dimitri Bivol or anyone else, world title level, very premature in my opinion.
Yeah, it's like you were saying before with Buatsi, overthinking, trying to be too technical, trying to be too perfect. I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost what Anthony Joshua has been doing in certain fights, like in the Usyk fight, where you're supposed to be imposing yourself physically on this guy and getting rough. And we know Buatsi can do that, but he does have a bit of Anthony Joshua about him in his demeanor, when he's talking in interviews and all that kind of thing, the same kind of vibe about him. But he's definitely got more dog in him, I would say, than AJ. Not like AJ hasn't got any dog in him at all, but I think naturally Buatsi's got more dog in him. I think we've seen that already, the way he's come through certain things in fights. The busted eye against Kalic, and the rough rounds. He had a few rough rounds against what's the other guy fought last time out? I forget his name. Bolotniks. And here against Spider Richards. So but overthinking, I think with a guy like Buatsi, who is very tenacious, I think it's kind of, it works against his natural ability to try and restrain him too much, to try and make him too technical. Yeah. And obviously you take it on a fight by fight basis, depending on the opponent's style. But with a guy like Spider, you don't want to be technical with him. Spider's actually a bit of a veteran now. You know what I mean? I don't think he's even had that many fights, but he fights like a veteran. He's tricky and he's awkward. And a guy like that, you want to stick it on him and keep the pressure on him rather than allowing him to box. But anyway. Anyway, so good fight. Moving on to the card in the United States. And the only fight I saw was the main event, which was you go first. Tell us what you thought about Benavidez versus Lemieux.
You know what? I'm kicking myself because I'm not much of a betting man, but I got a couple of free bets yesterday. Just two free £10 bets. I put one on Babic to win in the second round or the first two rounds. That flopped. I put another one on Buatsi to stop Richards 9-12. That flopped. And so I was thinking before I went to bed, I was like, you know what? I might just put a bet on Benavidez to stop Lemieux in the first three rounds.
Mm.
And I was like, nah, I'm not having any luck to that, so I'm not going to do it. Oh man, I'm kicking myself. But I expected as much. Lemieux, is it fair to say he's over the hill? Well, his best days are certainly behind him, and
Mm.
obviously this fight was at super middleweight, and has Lemieux even fought at super middleweight before this? I'm not
Yeah, I
entirely
think he
sure.
has. Yeah, I think he has.
Okay, fair enough. But I mean, he didn't have the greatest punch resistance at middleweight.
Mm.
Um, he was a legit puncher at middleweight, which made him dangerous. Did that power carry up to super middle? I can't say because I didn't watch any of these super middleweight fights. But yeah, I think this was. I'm going to go as far as saying I think this was easy pickings for David Benavidez,
Mm.
um, because yeah, he's not the finished article just yet, but um, at this stage of their careers, I personally expected the result, and it happened. He's
Mm.
I haven't really seen that much of Benavidez, but he's for a big man because he's listed at 6 foot, but I swear for years he was listed at 6'3".
Yeah.
Um, but regardless, he's a tall guy, much taller than Lemieux, but was able to tighten his shots up a lot better than Lemieux,
Mm.
which is always impressive. This is something that AJ impressed me with early in his career. For a man of 6'6", to tighten his shots up on the inside the way he does, the hooks and the uppercuts, it's always something I like to see.
Mm.
And Benavidez does that. A little bit lazy with his feet, and I want to say his active guard. A lot of the time he will just bring his gloves up. I'd like to see a bit more activity, a bit more of a dynamic element, but you can see that he relies on the kind of catch and counter style, and that's why, yeah, he'll just put his hands up, and then you'll wail away, and he'll catch you with something and follow up.
Mm.
Very dynamic puncher, quick, I want to say, or quick hands at least
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
his size. So there's a lot to like, but a little bit lazy in some regards, I think.
Mm.
Footwork in guard, especially.
Yeah, he landed some nice catch counters on
Yeah,
Lemieux
mm.
several
that first
times.
left hook, oh, sent him right into the turnbuckle.
Yeah, poor Lemieux. Uh, to me, Lemieux looked pudgy. I know that they say he was a big middleweight, but he looked pudgy to me at 168. So maybe this is a guy who isn't that disciplined. I know that, you know, metabolism and all that plays a factor. Some people find it difficult to get down and get ripped and all that, but I don't know. I suspect Lemieux is not the most disciplined guy, and he looked small in there, very small. And I'm not just
Yeah,
talking about his height. I just mean in every way he looked small. His head looked small. His shoulders, everything about him was small. And I think he was, way out of his depth in terms of size. And Benavidez was just too big because Lemieux was throwing everything at him. And to Benavidez, it was like raindrops. It was nothing. He just shook it off like, he wasn't affected in any way. I mean, Lemieux was the kind of puncher at middleweight where he could come in and hit you with some shots that you half block and it still affects you. But
yeah,
against Benavidez, there was none of that. I mean, Benavidez just laughed at him for a little catch counter, and Lemieux was on rubbery legs. So yeah, it was a one-sided affair for poor David Lemieux. But he showed heart. I have to give him credit for that. He went out on his shield and tried to catch Benavidez with something, but yeah, he weren't there.
yeah. I think it speaks volumes. There's levels to this, weight classes for a reason. Because back at middleweight, a lot of people said or would say that Lemieux was the biggest puncher at middleweight when he was a
Mm,
champion. Golovkin was seen as the better fighter, but one like punch for punch, like one hitter quitter power.
mm,
Lemieux was often ahead of Golovkin in that regard in people's eyes, and
Mm,
it was nothing to deter Benavidez, but
mm,
that's that's Benavidez against a former middleweight champion. What happens when he goes up against the other top dogs? Because Benavidez, when you look at his record, like the past few years, he's got some decent form. Fighting
mm.
contenders and a couple former champions, I believe. But
Yeah,
super middleweight now, who is there? To be fair, it's
there's nobody. There's
yeah.
Canelo, there's Benavidez, and that's literally it. I know you still got one of the Darrell brothers still hanging about. I don't know why,
Oh dear, let's talk
but
about old school.
I think Anthony Darrell is still hanging about somewhere. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
other than that,
Benavidez already beat Anthony Durrell as well.
yeah, yeah. So there's really not much there, and people are saying that after Benavidez knocked out Lemieux, they're saying, "Oh, okay, he's gonna." I think it was Teddy Atlas that tweeted, "Canelo can't call himself the best at 168 until he fights Benavidez." I mean,
Mm,
I'm not so
yeah,
sure about that. I'm not so sure about that, but it's still a decent fight, and maybe Canelo will look at that at some point, perhaps after the Triple G fight, or potentially the Bivol rematch. But there's one thing I'm happy about with Benavidez, and that is that he changed his waistband. I don't know if you saw the way he used to have the biggest waistband in boxing history.
yeah. It looked like he was standing in a barrel.
Like Benavidez waistband was like there was more waistband than actual shorts. Like the bottom part of the shorts. It
Yeah,
was mostly weight. It was crazy. Why did Benavidez have such a massive waistband for so many years? That was bizarre.
yeah. Chris in the comments saying Benavidez has talent, but much of what he does is reliant on his size. And I agree with that because in this fight against uh, Lemieux, there were moments where Benavidez, he almost looked a bit kind of George Foreman-esque. George Foreman, he'd
Mm,
get his hands on you and he'd
mm,
physically move you. He'd hold you in place, land a punch, move you off. And so I can definitely see that. He's
mm,
very physical, like he's quite hands-on.
mm. And I'm wondering how that would work against Canelo, a guy who's hands-on like that, a guy who's strong and hands-on. I mean, you'd think it will play into Canelo's hands because Canelo likes you to engage him. He doesn't like a guy like Bivol who's moving around and making it awkward for him. But is Benavidez going to do that, or is he actually going to go to war with Canelo? I'm not saying Benavidez can't win a fight that way, but conventionally, when a fighter does that with Canelo, it plays into his hands. Canelo likes to counterpunch. He likes you to
Yeah,
come to him, really. I know he's turned into this pressure fighter over the past few years, but that's out of necessity. But earlier on in Canelo's career, his default is he would prefer you to come to him. I remember even before he fought Mayweather, you'd often see Canelo in fights on the ropes doing his little shoulder roll, countering people and what have you. When he fought James Kirtland, yeah, he was doing a lot of defensive stuff and then catching Kirtland with shots. So I don't know how that would work out with Benavidez and Canelo. Be an interesting fight. I mean, the nearest thing we have to compare to it is Callum Smith because he's a similar. Well, he might even be taller than Benavidez, but similar style because he's a tall guy who tends to fight short. Because Benavidez
yeah,
doesn't tend to fight long like that. He tends to fight short. So I think Benavidez has got more energy than Callum Smith. He's got more, probably more dog in him. Definitely more dog in him than Callum Smith. But it's an interesting fight.
yeah. To be fair, like Benavidez, he is a former champion, not the most
Mm,
disciplined champion, but yeah, like if you want to say, okay, Canelo's undisputed, there's one guy left for him to completely clean out this kind of generation of super middleweights. Yeah, I can understand why that fight's happening. Um,
mm,
but something tells me that I just have a feeling that Benavidez would potentially approach that fight differently and would, sometimes a fighter they really take it up a notch in the biggest fight of their career and they do things they don't necessarily expect. I think
mm,
Benavidez would probably he'd use his size a bit more in that fight. But that's assuming it even happens.
Yeah, assuming it happens, because Canelo, he's got all kind of different directions he can go in. This is the Golovkin rematch, Bivol, and so on. So I'm not sure that Benavidez is particularly high on his list of priorities at the moment. So we'll have to see how it goes. All right, let's see what the chat's saying. I'm sure you got some questions in here. Okay, Andrade. Yeah, Andrade's a 168 now, apparently, anyway, because there's that Zach Parker fight that didn't happen because Andrade's apparently injured. But I'm not sure what's going on there. What else we got here? Virgil Hunter's rep only alive because of Andre Ward. Yeah, Virgil Hunter gets a lot of stick. People say that he's not as good as he's made out to be. I get that. Because at the end of the day, a tree is known by its fruits, and he's only produced Andre Ward, really. He did some good work, I think, with Amir Khan. But other than that, what Virgil Hunter project has really produced anything other than Andre Ward and a little spell with Khan?
Yeah, someone left that comment on my pre-fight video for Buatsi versus Richards, and I think it's a fair question, because you look at Hunter's record, I guess you could say, as a trainer, and you obviously got Ward, and that's an elite tier name to have, especially when you consider it's from scratch as well. Like, we're talking, what was Ward, 11 years old when he first got into boxing with Hunter. As you say, he did some good things with Khan. So let's say those two are pluses, but then you have Andre Berto, you have Angulo, who not as much, and that kind of detracts from Virgil Hunter's ability as a coach, if you want to say that. In my opinion, when you consider those 4 fighters alone, it's basically, it just reinforces the idea that a coach is only as good as who he has in front of him. There's only so much a coach can do. And I say this from experience. I've been a boxing coach for a few years now, not doing anything special, just working with youngsters. But sometimes you have fighters and boxers and talents who you can address something new techniques, new strategies, whatever, every week. You have other people in boxing, other fighters who you're having to spend month after month after month, sometimes even years, constantly rehashing and revisiting fundamentals. So I don't think you can really, you just have to take it with a pinch of salt. And okay, this is a man who knows boxing, but he's not necessarily going to be the best fit for everyone. And you have to, it's really a case by case basis, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Virgil Hunter's an old guy. So how many fighters can he really work with? He hasn't been in the best of health over the past couple of years. You got to factor that in as well. And also Virgil Hunter's approach. Because Virgil Hunter, for the longest time, for many, many decades, he worked as a parole officer, right? So he took that mentality to, his boxing coaching, where he wanted to rehabilitate fighters. So he would, take on fighters who were going through rough patches in their careers, like Amir Khan, like Andre Berto, like Alfredo Angulo, and several other fighters, who were all having these issues. So it's also who he's picking to train. Some trainers wouldn't have taken on those projects. They would have taken on maybe less challenging projects, people that are unbeaten and on the way up, rather than people that have had difficult times in their careers. And also, like you say, not every trainer is going to be the best fit for every fighter. I always look at Customado as an example. Customado had a style which was very difficult to master. Very, very few people have been able to take that Customado style and be successful. In fact, most people over the years who try it get knocked out badly, like horribly, especially heavyweights when they try that Customado, Mike Tyson, Floyd Patterson style, they get horribly exposed when they try to use that. So it's a very, very difficult style to master. I think you have to have a certain, you have to have reflexes, you have to have the right kind of hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness. It's a very unusual boxing style, the Customado style. The metronome type head movement, because normally a fighter won't move their head like that, like a metronome. Customado would tell fighters to stand straight up a lot of the time and move their head from side to side. It's very unusual, rather than crouching it. They did do all the crouching stuff as well, but primarily he like them to be able to look their opponent in the eye, but also be elusive at the same time, rather than looking at the canvas because they're in a crouch and then coming up and all that kind of thing. So very difficult style to master. And I think with Virgil Hunter, he obviously looks at Andre Ward and he tries to take what worked for Ward and use it on many other fighters, on probably every other fighter. So I think he needs to be a bit more maybe bespoke, and tailor what he's teaching to the actual fighter a bit more, rather than trying to turn everybody into an Andre Ward clone, because that's not going to work for everybody. In fact, it's going to, in the case of Buatsi, I think that, again, like I said earlier, not to go over old ground, but you can't make Buatsi too technical. Yeah, he's obviously got a certain amount of schooling from his amateur career and all that kind of thing, but you don't want a guy like that to overthink in the ring. I think that's going to be problematic for him. So, yeah, I think the criticism of Hunter is fair, but like I say, it's the same way as criticizing Customado. Some trainers don't have or don't teach a style that is very easy to master, So it's one of them ones.
I think with Hunter, obviously Ward is like his first, you could say his first ever project, and it happened to be the perfect mix, because Ward, I think people don't appreciate Andre Ward. Like, I understand his fights weren't that entertaining and they could be quite frustrating at times, but Ward, from a physical point of view, really wasn't anything special. He didn't have crazy athleticism for his weight class, but his mind, like, this man picks up on patterns so easily, so quickly.
Yeah.
And when you consider he had a lot of injuries as well, he was really a compromised fighter. So when I first started my channel, actually, I was talking about Joshua Buatsi because I wasn't particularly impressed with him, and it looked like he was trying to turn himself into the next version of Andre Ward, and I thought that was a bad idea, because you're basing yourself off of a compromised fighter, a fighter who was essentially one-handed, and you don't necessarily have his mental makeup. Whereas Buatsi, he's a lot more athletically gifted, a lot bigger, a lot stronger. I think hands down a better puncher with both hands. So he needs to, you can be intelligent and you can have a high IQ, but don't get caught up in paralysis by analysis. I think you've mentioned it yourself sometimes about how, you're not always thinking in the ring. A lot of it's your subconscious, but it comes from the drills that you do in your previous experience, especially in a quicker pace fight. In a slower fight, you can obviously have the time and space to think your way through and kind of engage your conscious brain a bit more. But with Buatsi, you've got to get going. You can't be on rails all the time, especially against a fighter like Spider, who moves well, controls distance and range well, is accurate, disciplined, good defense, good chin. It's a recipe for disaster sometimes.
Yeah, it's like what you were saying there with regards to the subconscious and all that I've talked about in my videos. I was thinking about this the other day. It's exactly like driving. When you're driving your car, you're not consciously driving your car. Like, if you're an experienced driver, you get in your car and you're thinking about all kinds of other stuff. And literally, your subconscious mind is driving your car for you. And you could be thinking about all kind of other things, and you're still reacting to things on the road. You're not like consciously calculating, okay, that car over there is swaying a little bit. This truck looks a bit, dodgy in the wind. I need to pull back this amount of meters. You're not doing all those calculations consciously. It's all subconscious. But when somebody goes on their first driving lesson, it's all in the conscious mind. That's why
Yeah.
they're jittery. Yeah, because they're thinking about everything consciously. All
Yeah, it's like
those
sensory overload.
sensory, exactly. It's like sensory overload. So they're all nervous and oh my gosh, and they see a car here and a car there and a pedestrian there. It's all in the conscious mind. Yeah. But once you have enough training, once you have enough experience, all that information gets collected by the subconscious mind, and then it's like autopilot. Then you can think about other stuff when you're driving down the street. You're not even worried. You're just reacting all naturally. So yeah, I think with Buatsi, be instinctive. Don't overthink. Don't try to be too conscious about what you're doing. Just exactly like you said. It's like driving a car.
Yeah, just got to let it flow. And that that initiative, that kind of, what do you want to call it, subconscious mastery, I guess you could say, to stop you
Mm,
from overthinking, that just comes with time, and you can't rush it because it's the result of years and years of fighting, sparring, drilling, and that's when you see a fighter at their technical best, and it just flows. It's like second nature, and you're like, oh wow, this guy is really mastering it.
mm.
Mastery comes with time.
Comment here from Chris Andre. Big up Chris again. He said, I think Buatsi might have some natural stamina issues though. So I think part of him has to be technical at points because I don't think he can be a hunter non-stop. Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier with regards to the Spider Richards fight. I was saying I'm not sure whether it was a tactical thing for Buatsi to fight in spurts the way he did, whether it's because it's a stamina issue. So he can't, constantly apply pressure. I feel like he was nervous or tense in the Spider fight, and I think that would have affected his stamina as well. And also, I think because he hadn't been to 12 rounds, he was consciously trying to pace himself and thinking, okay, I've got this amount of attacks in a particular round, and if I go over that, I'm gonna be in a stamina deficit and I'm gonna need to take the round off. So I think he was conscious about how many times he could actually launch a serious attack. And also, some of the attacks against Spider was so ferocious. Do you know what I mean? When Buatsi was going in, that it was maybe a bit too much. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like he might have wasted energy on some of those attacks because they weren't actually that accurate. A lot of them, he get one shot through, and then the other shots would miss. So I feel like he could have done a better job knowing when to let his hands go. There were certain moments where Spider was more stationary, and like the inside work that Buatsi was doing was good. The Andre Ward style stuff with the little shots up close, the body shots. I think he should have done more of that before launching those crazy all-in attacks, because the all-in attacks were early in the fight. I think he should have maybe saved them till later on in the fight against a tricky vet like Spider Richards. So, but anyway, it's all part of the learning process. All right. I think we're gonna wrap it up. But before we do, I just want to touch on this music thing again because I know it's gonna be a talking point. So in the chat, all the stuff I've been saying about music, Kano, Gets, and all these guys, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me the Gets tune or the Kano tune that came out over the past few years that means anything right now. You guys tell me. Because I went to Get's channel and there's nothing on there other than trash. Just being real. Yeah, you can spit bars, but there's nothing that you would remember the next day. So
Yeah, like I can give you my own anecdotes with that because I'm not like a massive music head, but I grew up listening to grime. So Kano, Gets, all of those guys of that generation, they were the go-tos. They're not
mm,
anymore.
yeah,
That hence why Kano's going on Top Boy.
yeah,
He wouldn't necessarily be doing that for what, 4 seasons if his music career was popping that much, realistically.
mm,
But like I could go to teenagers these days and it's 50-50 whether they've
mm,
heard P's and Q's.
mm,
Whereas
mm,
everyone of a certain age has. and
Yeah,
it's just the nature of it. Like grime is out, grime is dead.
yeah,
You know, it's sad, but it's true.
yeah, super dead. And I think that, to give Kano and Gets their props, they had this whole King of Grime thing that's been running since, well, the beginning of grime. And I think that Stormzy, see, this is going to upset some people. I think of all the kings of grime, Stormzy is the weakest one ever. I think Stormzy was the weakest one. I never liked Stormzy's music. I never understood it. The only Stormzy track I ever liked was the Freestyle in the Park. Shut up. That's it.
Mm.
Other than that, never a fan of Storm. I didn't think he was that talented. Gets, Kano, in their day, levels and levels above Stormzy. Way, way above Stormzy. But yeah, Grime's done. And Kano and Gets are done. They've moved on to, well, Kano's moved on. Gets, I guess, is still trying to have a music career, but that is what that is. Steel City says, what do you think of Kalashnikov back in the day? Yeah, Kalashnikov was sick back in the day. For one album, at least. The Sagas, he was sick on there. Shame about the production, because it, sounded like he was produced in a toilet or something. I don't know who produced that album. The mix downs are all horrible. It was just horrible sound quality. But Clash's bars, crazy. Some of the greatest UK rap bars you'll ever hear were on Kalashnikov's first album, The Sagas. Crazy, crazy. But he's never really hit that peak again. He's never really hit that level again, Kalashnikov. He's never been able to recapture that form. Copenhagen Cliff says, Kalashnikov, The Sagas was like the UK Illmatic. Yeah, in terms of bars, it was. In terms of bars and a vibe, it really was. It's just a shame about the production because it was very, very hit and miss. And the production could have been good if they'd had the proper mix downs, because some of the beats, you could see it was a good idea, but whoever mixed it down didn't know what on earth they were doing.
Yeah, see, the number one makes a good point. He says, I remember singing Shut Up in college class and everyone laughing at it. It was a piss take song. Yeah, I was in college when that song came out, and yeah, it was kind of catchy, but it was like a little bit of a joke song. Nobody really took it seriously. At least the people I was around, And I feel like, as I say, I'm no music head, but the music these days, especially, would you call it rap, or I guess a lot of it could be classed as drill. Yeah, it's just not that good. I swear, it's always, I ask people, like, why do you like this song? Like, realistically. And it's always the beat. It's always the beat. And it's like, all the beats sound the same. It's all snare and nothing else.
Yeah.
And
they all
and the
recycle
bass.
that same snare as well.
Yeah. Just constantly. And it's like every
Mhm.
song sounds the same. There's no intelligence in the lyrics. Half of these guys, they're just they've all got silly names. They're all carbon copies.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I don't understand is all the silly names now. Like, nobody can just
Yeah.
have a straightforward name. Other than Dave. Yeah, Dave's got the most straightforward name you could possibly have, Santan Dave. But everybody else has got some weird name. In America, it's even worse when they got these guys
gosh,
like,
yeah.
what was that emo rapper called? Triple X Tentacion. Like,
Oh, yeah, X, yeah.
yeah, weird ass names, man. What's this all about?
Yeah, that American rap, it's like they're not even rappers. It's like they're trying to be rock stars, with the tattoos and the screaming and like. I guess the only one of that kind of generation who you could say is in the mainstream who's a rapper, quote unquote, is probably 6ix9ine, and you've hit rock bottom when that's the
case. Yeah. Tekashi 6ix9ine. Chris Andre says the beat plays a big role and it is recycled, as you say. That's why I like K Coke's conspiracy theory. He actually has something to say. And talking about Akala, a couple of people mentioned Akala again. See, this is why Akala cancelled himself this past 2 years. Akala should have been the first guy to come out and say something about what's been happening this past. He should have been the first guy. Yeah. But instead, You got a gangster rapper like K Coke. That's what K Coke is. It's not even his job to come out and start, going against the government and what have you. It's not even his job. He's a gangster rapper. But he stood up and actually was saying stuff, and Akala was dead silent. So as far as I'm concerned, Akala cancelled himself. He's done. Yeah, he's a little champagne revolutionary. He's not really about that life. And yeah, that's it. He's done. Zubi is what Akala has been pretending to be for all these years. Zubi's the real deal. So those of you guys who like Akala, see CBC Boxing saying, didn't Akala speak out after the George Floyd death? That's nothing to speak out about. That's mainstream news. I'm talking about the stuff you're not allowed to speak about in the mainstream news over the past 2 years. Like, come on, bro. You haven't been living in a time capsule this past 2 years. There's been loads of stuff you ain't allowed to speak about here, on the news, anywhere. And Akala weren't saying nothing. But man like K Coke, who's a gangster rapper, it's not even his job, he's talking about it. Yeah? Akala's a fraud. When it was time to actually stand up and be about all the stuff he's been talking about for all these years, man goes missing. So if you like the idea of somebody like Akala, Zubi's the guy you need to be following, because he's the real deal. He's shown over this past 2 years he's the real deal. Akala's some joker. That's it. Akala's some little champagne revolutionary up there with the BBC lovies. That's it. That's all Akala is. That's a joke. So anyway, we're going to wrap this up. Big up to Outmatch for joining me on this live.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Shout out to everybody in the chat, especially the super chatters. And I'll catch you guys next time. We out.
Take it easy, people.